Hey everyone, Salem back here with another video finally in 2026. Had a whole year off, didn't make any. If you're a new viewer, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, I'm gonna real quick answer for you where have I been and what have I been up to before we jump to the main purpose of this video. I haven't posted in a while because, as you may know, as a returning viewer, I mostly posted about salamanders, firestorm detachment. I was very specialized in what I was talking about. And that was enjoyable for a while when I wasn't competing, or if I ever switched to a different game system for a little bit, or even to a different army, which is what ended up happening. I really didn't feel like I could talk about it on here because that wasn't something I had really established. Yeah, I did some Legions Imperialis videos before that. I moved on from that because nobody in my area was really playing it, so I very, very quickly ran out of confident things I could say about that system. And as I was moving on from Firestorm 1, when I was still playing it, there wasn't a lot of variation that I could really make a full video out of, right? Even at tournaments. And 2, I was playing a different army, so I didn't feel like I could talk about things, as we'll get into later in this video. I have since decided that I just want to continue talking about wargaming things of all styles, and the best way to not pigeonhole myself is to just go ahead and do it and move on and post more content about a wider variety of things, and hopefully y'all all enjoy that. And some of it will still be Salamanders based, but a lot of it's going to cover significantly wider wargaming going forward. That brings us to the purpose of today's video. With our new setup, we're going to go ahead and talk through what all was I up to in 2025, because I certainly didn't take a break from actual wargaming. In fact, I think I was busier than ever in 2025 in terms of wargaming and accomplishments in the hobby and stuff I would love to share with y'all. So we're gonna go month by month in 2025 and talk about my hobby update. January started us off and I did end up attending LVO, but I didn't go for 40K, I went for Bolt Action. If you're not familiar with Bolt Action, it is a World War II centric miniature game, and I collect the French in their glorious early war fashion with their 1910s vehicles that do very little to anything. Bolt Action's a lot of fun. It uses a varied order die system for activations, so all of your units have a die associated with them. As your opponents, they all go into a singular bag, and to figure out whose turn it is, you take turns drawing dice out of the bag. Any die that gets pulled out that's your color, you can assign for an order on any of your units, and it keeps the turns fresh while also having an interesting wrinkle in list building, because you have to balance out, do you want more veteran units or more armor, or do you want more activations so that you can more consistently pull your dice out of the bag? It's a lot of fun as a system. It's very easy to remember rules-wise because a rifle is a rifle between all factions. Most of the rules are universal for the most part. You're kind of varying just on hey, what am I actually able to equip in these spots? And maybe they have a special rule. It's very rare, but sometimes they will have a special rule, which can often just be ignoring leadership checks, penalties, and stuff like that. It's also a game that's great to play Beer and Pretzels way because there is quite a lot of old Hammer rules-wise in it that is great. You're not allowed to pre-measure in the game, which is something that, as someone who's been playing 40K since 4th edition, I didn't realize how much I missed, and it's actually really funny. If you declare a charge and you are running 12 inches with a unit, and the person you're charging is actually 13 inches away, you stop an inch short and now you are stuck right in front of them out in the open. If you go to shoot and you're too short with your shot, hey, your shot misses. And there's a lot of stuff like mortars zoning in, counting down, forcing your opponent to move because they only hit on a 6, but then it improves if the opponent stands still, or random artillery barrages or aircraft coming in that could potentially be shot down if the opponent brought flak, or maybe your own guys fail to restrain their fire and accidentally shoot it down, or maybe it's even a rookie pilot who can't tell who the enemy is and they accidentally shoot you. There's a lot of that kind of stuff, a little bit of inherent imbalance and kookiness in the system that makes it a great Beer and Pretzel system. As with any World War II game, I think a lot of people want that. You're just looking at these very fun historical miniatures for the most part and just getting them on the table. For me, my faction has a bunch of tanks that literally have the rule pitifully slow, and there was another old man at the tournament who brought 7 of them, and he was a joy because his entire goal for the 2 days we were playing bolt action was to ram something with these tanks. And I think he was able to succeed on his final game into like ramming a little Jeep and running it over with this pitifully slow vehicle. It is a system that I highly recommend for people experiencing any kind of burnout. The models are very easy to build and paint, with the exception of the vehicles. The vehicles can be a little bit rough, but the actual infantry is very nice. That being said, it is not a game that I recommend taking very competitively. After LVO and after coming home, going to my local store and hosting a bolt action tournament there, both were a lot of fun, both were a great experience. Both times my friends and I spoke and we realized, based on what other people were able to concoct for the tournaments, that the rule set is abusable, and it is very easy to break immersion depending on if you're a certain faction, you just spam some stuff, which, you know, we've played 40K now in the world where there's no force organization chart. It feels worse in a World War II game, is the thing, where there's actual force organization still. But when you're cooking around that force org in a World War II game where you're expecting to see these interesting regiments everywhere and you're just like spamming as many auto cannons and heavy auto cannons as you can with all the busted rules, that feels bad even if you beat it, and it's very hard to beat. That kind of stuff exists, and it exists in a way that is a little bit harder to swallow because the game doesn't have very regular updates. That's a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because, again, the game system is very easy to pick up, and that means you don't have to be constantly tracking it. But it's a bad thing in that stuff like that doesn't get patched out very much, and it's a bad thing in that the rules coming out in the new edition are incredibly slow. As the French, I'm technically one of the minor factions. The game's been out in its current edition for, I think, 1.5 years now, maybe more. And we're not going to get a dedicated book until October of this year. That's a long time to be stuck with just a single PDF called the Get By PDF of kind of a limited roster of units and rules. And if you're like the French and some of your rules are quite bad, you just kind of have to swallow that. And if you can have fun with it, like I have been, that's great. But not everyone wants to do that. So if you can approach it with that understanding and knowing, hey, I need to not just spam the best stuff I can and make it as annoying as possible. I need to prioritize putting cool models on the board, cool tanks. I have the big Bertha World War I tank that literally has just a bunch of machine guns and bad armor, moves slow, but it's so big that you can hide other models behind it. I field it every game that I can because it's not good, but it's hilarious to see on the table and everyone loves it. And that's kind of the end game. I will say bolt action is a perfect replacement for old Warhammer heads like myself that perhaps enjoy or miss old Apocalypse games, right? Nowadays, Apocalypse games, just everything's dead. Turn 1, turn 2, and then everyone gets exhausted because that's just how 40K is nowadays. It's not bad. That's not, you know, that is a bit of a critique. I can talk about it later, but stuff just kind of dies. And on Apocalypse games, everything's in the open and nothing hides, and then everything dies. Older 40K, you had the process of if you had an Apocalypse day at a local game store, you took a full day or like a half day to set up the army, maybe play turn 1. Everyone would go home and come back the next day. And you'd be playing tactically, you'd be shouting orders, or like maybe you had mixed tables that was like they were lobbing guns over. There were actual front lines. Things didn't die quite as easy back then. So even though you had giant weapons, you had people that could heroically hang on and fight in the midfield. Apocalypse used to be a lot of fun, a lot more regular to see because of that. Having played a team game of bolt action, it felt like that. You had these giant battle lines of mixed operations going on, with alternating rules like minefields or sand or snow and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. So I highly recommend it. And if you play bolt action, let me know what you play. February came, my fun in Vegas was over, and it was time to return to some 40K prep because we have our local Blue Ridge GT that we do every year. And February was my time to prep for it, as well as prep for the local 40K league that I run here in my hometown. For the GT, I was kind of expanding on my salamanders, but with a twist. I ended up playing Liberator Assault Group Blood Angels, which, for those of you who don't know, is a very infantry centric, very hard hitting, jump pack centric Blood Angels list. But at the time, you could run it without any Blood Angels characters, and it was called Bloodless Angels because 40k is in that weird space with Space Marines where you can take any detachment with some limitations, right? I had been adding a lot of jump packs to my salamanders if you had seen any of my past videos. And at this point, I just said, let's go full in. And I was testing out a big list that was not a single vehicle. And I think about 75% of the models had jump packs in them. And it was a ton of fun. It was working very well. And February was really my time to test that with a lot of my friends and sort of refine it to its core and see what I could make out of it before going to that GT. Also, painting it up was a pain, and I was only able to get it really battle ready. I had 9 Inceptors, which if you've ever had to deal with models on those little dingy flight stands, you know how much of a pain that can be. I ended up finding these on Deadly Print Studios. These are some wonderful smokestacks that I ended up buying the pre-painted versions. You can put them into the turbines and you don't have to deal with it. And you can see here, unfortunately, I still haven't finished painting these models, but it is such that they very easily, of course I pick up one that just doesn't have its jump pack on. That's how great I am with these minis. Here's the jump pack though. You can pick up one that just doesn't have it on and snugly fit it in. Some of them do correlate to like certain poses, something to keep in mind. And then you can just paint it by taking it back off. It's very easy. If you're worried about the basing, you can do what I do and put like a little bit of Gorilla Putty underneath so that you can pull it off the base whenever you are ready to do a little bit of touch-up basing on it if you want, just to put like some texture around the corners that aren't hit by it. And these things are a lifesaver. So we were playing around a lot with that, both in terms of building out the list and getting like as many deals as I could on jump packs and like older ones as well, because I prefer like older looking Vanguard vet jump packs. In addition to that though, we were starting to experiment with my new 40k sort of love, which is World Leaders. I had a great deal come up on a lot army that a friend of mine no longer wanted to be playing. I purchased it and then decided I was going to run it for our local league. I, at this time in February, had the entire thing primed bronze because I had a wacky idea for a paint scheme that ended up working quite well. And as you can see on my top shelf here, these boys are kind of my main thing now, as we'll be getting into later. It was a lot of fun and definitely a challenge transitioning to a sort of heavy tank style of play with some infantry support to nothing but infantry again for a second list that was running in February that is just running forward, getting the opponent real scared and then trapping them and cutting them to bits. It's been a ton of fun, and at the time during the index they were insanely powerful if you were running them a particular way. I still don't own Angron. I'm a non-Gron player and I refuse to buy him. But that new model did just come out for the Horus Heresy line that I may end up getting because that one actually looks cool. I won't field it, but I may buy it. It was certainly interesting sort of developing 2 different armies at this time that fully went into close range, melee centric play after everything I had been doing and all the 40k I've played over the years. You know, every list I made slowly was incorporating more and more melee elements into my salamanders. So I was like, let's just go full force and see how it feels. And it's real hard to come back. I've played a few different systems now. I've played a few different armies now as well. And in both of those cases, I tend to put a little bit too much melee now into those armies because I'm so used to it that it can sometimes be a detriment. But it's a lot of fun and it's a lot of challenge and it increases your skill as a player as you practice it. I don't know how well this will come up on camera, but this is my buddy Soul Razor here. And you can see what I've done here is I've used that bronze, if it'll focus, I've used that bronze primer to kind of then go over them with contrast and a matte varnish to give them sort of this otherworldly warp sheen that maybe doesn't come up on camera well. But these guys are a lot of fun to paint. I really enjoy the demons in the Khorne Demonkin detachment. I've done a few videos on them now, Here's one where I guess started on the red path. So it's been a lot of fun exposing myself to these. I know I've said that like it's been a lot of fun like 3 times now, but it just is. I get very happy when I get to pose my demons. March was real busy. I got to go to the Blue Ridge GT, as I mentioned earlier, which is our local GT I try to go to every year. And I ended up going 4-1 with my Bloodless Angels Salamanders with jump packs. This was back when if you had Oath of Moment and you were a Blood Angel, you still got the +1 to wound that they gave them. This is before they changed that rule. So it was really strong, running nothing but jump packs that can fly forward. You know, I would have half the squads with chaplains, or 2 of them rather. So they were getting +1, and then wherever the captain went, he was getting the +1 to wound because of Oath. I could Oath something and have Sternguard attack it on the flanks for Immortals. I could throw in Scepters down in the backfield and just overcharge their Twin Link Plasmas into whatever I wanted. It was really effective. And the first game I lost was against the guy who won the whole thing, Mark Hertel, Gator, who's a great ITC player who commonly runs just a lot of Land Raiders. I ended up playing him on a rather open layout on a mission I wasn't really prepared for, and I definitely was too tired to be playing him at that point during the day, and he just roasted me with his list. And I made so many mistakes, but it was a fun time. He was a great opponent. I talked to him throughout the rest of the event. And I then, just got the Submarine, pair down, and play a lot of fun games, including my second game, which was into an Imperial Agents player, which you never see at a tournament. So it was great seeing that here at this event. And that was surprisingly close. I didn't realize how lethal those tiny little squads can be and how troublesome they can be to remove. So it was a lot of fun to see someone actually doing quite well with it. I don't think they did well in terms of record on the course of the event, but they were able to kind of show what the army can do, which is something very difficult to say with an army like Imperial Agents. You don't have a lot of people that can really take the time to make that shine, especially because it requires a lot of models to do and a lot of different units, one of which always seems to be Canis Rex. But I ended up winning that one, and in round 3, I got to fight my buddy Trevor, which was funny because every time we go to a GT, we end up pairing into each other. And it's always in round 3 for some reason. He was feeling very bad. I think he had food poisoning, if I remember correctly, during the event. And we got paired, and I ran out into the convention hall just like, hey! And I could see his face just completely drained of all color because of how sickly he was feeling. And he just stared up in disbelief. And was like, I'm gonna die right here today. So I was more than happy to make it a sort of full send game when I was playing him, partly because of that, partly because he was playing Tyranids, and there's something about Tyranids, I hate them, and I always overestimate what they can do. Every single one of their units I'm convinced can kill me. I'm scared of every single one of their models. And so when I fight them nowadays, I just run at them and try to kill them as fast as I can because I'm terrified. And surprisingly, that usually works. And it did work here because when you have all these 14 wound monsters rolling around and a bunch of jump packs just do mortals to them and then get +1 to wound them with 50 plus attacks at high strength because of the detachment rules and all that, they kind of just explode, and then it's very difficult for them to continuously crawl back from them, especially if you have more stuff coming and a little bit of shooting to deal with everything else, which I did. It was a lot of fun. It was a good way to wrap up round 3, and luckily he did not collapse at the table with his sickness and was able to come back day 2 feeling much better. Day 2, I was able to fight then an Eldar player who was not very happy with the Blood Angels Codex. He had apparently been a playtester for it or something, allegedly. I'm not really sure, and the entire time he was complaining through it. But I couldn't really blame him because he had all this fragile elves that every time a jump pack hit them, even if they had fight first, here's all these mortals and your unit's dead. Great. It was still a fun game. It was just one of those ones where you're constantly apologizing the whole time, and this wasn't something I had picked up because it was a meta pick, but apparently it was, and I recognized that. I just love jump packs and wanted to build a bunch of jump packs, so I guess I just naturally ended up on that wagon. And then round 5, I got to fight Matt Wilkins of Away Games and his Grey Knights and have another game where it's just like, 40k is not supposed to work when you just decide to full send, but I was like, there's Grey Knights, they're going up and down, they have all this anti-infantry stuff. I'm just going to advance and charge into his NDKs, which are Nemesis Dread Knights. And that kept working. That just kept hitting them and killing them, and then he would very slowly ran out of resources. In the end, it still ended up close because of some mistakes I had made, but I ended up winning that one and going 4-1 at the event, which at a GT always feels nice, especially when you only lose to the winner of the whole thing. Second half of March had no hopping to report because I very happily got married finally in March, and I've been with my wife now for going on over 9 years at this point. So we're very happy to be finally celebrating our first wedding anniversary in about a month's time now. So I am looking forward to that. April and May I can kind of talk about at the same time because they were mostly in service of the Richmond Open. April being a lot of prep for it, and then May being the actual Open, at least the beginning of May. I had been running World Eaters in our town's local 40k league and doing quite well with them, having a lot of fun, kind of figuring out the tricks of the index. I like the new Grotmus attachment. What are the benefits of both? And I was in the playoffs for that league and had refined my list to a point where I felt confident bringing it to the Richmond Open and taking the World Eaters to a tournament for the very first time. Got it all battle ready. It did not look good like the main Berserkers did. And this was before Demonkin, so I was still figuring out like my paint scheme. But I still had and still do have, because of the timing of that codex. The codex came out very quickly after that. The Battle Ready Exalted, which just do not have any actual like finished shading on them. Yeah, and you can see the sand is still just the putty, and they're not even base rimmed. They're battle ready, and that was what I needed. And I was doing a lot of work trips at the time, so I didn't have a lot of time to actually finish them, so I was just happy to get them to this point. So having decided to take them to the Richmond Open, once again, in classic fashion, as I tend to do at quite a lot of larger events that aren't RTTs, I lose the first game because I'm not focusing and I'm not fully there, and I'm just trying to be a friendly guy. And that sometimes works out. Sometimes you make a friend or you have a good time. Sometimes you meet a guy who is not ready to do that, and that's fine. It can go either way. At this particular tournament, I ended up playing into a Thousand Suns player first. I had never played against Thousand Suns since they got a bunch of new stuff. I'm not sure if they had their book yet or not. I think they had their book. But they ended up just trouncing me because I kept forgetting Magnus can do the whole double move thing and would just shoot me with the tip of his wing. And I was able to keep it a little bit close until I just ran out of stuff and decided to talk it out with him because of all the mistakes I made. Again, though, that meant I got pair downs and was able to actually win out the rest of the event, including 2 final games against other World Eater players, which was a lot of fun because they were playing Angron and they were questioning me on why I wasn't running him, and I just had to keep looking at him and be like, I am diametrically opposed to running Angron. I will never have him. And Karn is all I need, and sure enough, that proved true. In both games, Karn killed Angron, and Angron never came back. And I was very happy because I walked away with my first ever Best in Faction trophy. It's not the first ever time I've gotten it. I was Best Codex Marines at Nova in 2024, but I got a little trophy this time with the World Leader symbol. And there was a chance in the finals based on some other games that shaped up. Like I could have won Best Overall Chaos, and I was actively cheering the guy on because I didn't, the guy that would have stopped me from getting that, because I didn't want that. I wanted this. I wanted Best World Eater specifically. It felt only appropriate after having to duel 2 others who were competing for it there. Richmond Open was also great because 2 of my friends, Eric Aliff and Trent Mazer, ended up getting golden tickets to go to Worlds. And we were all super proud of them. Trent was playing with his Custodes, Eric with his Grey Knights. Eric got to win on stream with, I think, the Tactical Tortoise. I can't say tortoise, apparently. But we were all super happy for the both of them, our whole crew that went there. And yeah, it was an incredible tournament overall. And it was a great way to send off that index because the next month, the Codex for World Eaters came out. Additionally, in April, I got into yet another game. I should say, actually, I returned to the game that got me into this hobby as a whole when I was just 8 years old, and that was the Middle-earth strategy battle game. If you've not played, here, I'll get them. This is my little Elendil Numenor. If you've not played Middle-earth strategy battle game, it is still kind of a classic game. Yeah, it's got a little bit of the more recent sort of refurbishing that Games Workshop seems to be applying to their games, where it's like you can only equip what's in the kit. They're trying to like get rid of kit bashing incentives and stuff like that. But in terms of the actual rules, it's still got all that good stuff there, where it's like the troll can take an intelligence test to throw a horse at a knight and stuff like that. It's one of those classic games, and it still has the old weapon skill, list skill, wounding charts that I loved and grew up with, meaning that the game is actually one where it's a little bit harder for stuff to die. Anytime you hit something, you're usually wounding it on like a 5 or a 6, unless you're like a troll or something, obviously. And that feels interesting. It means there's longer, more drawn out fights. The position of your models, they all move one by one. You can sort of try to tactically gain an edge by outnumbering people, or you use your support flanks. How many spears do you have? Your archers, even though the range units, can still do stuff in combat because they still have a weapon. And the heroes. The heroes feel really, really good in a game like Middle-earth strategy battle game because they're not 40k where, oh, Trajan Valoris is here. Cool, I'll pick up my whole squad. It's like, yeah, they're a hero, but because of the way the fight system works, they can still lose fights fairly easily, and they can still be wounded, and even when they do well, they can't just completely wipe an entire flank. Like, if they do well, they'll potentially pick off a couple guys at a time, but that's it, right? And they have like a limited resource pool in forms of might that lets them help in combat, but also lets them like command their troops more effectively, and it kind of depends on how you're spending it. It's a great game, especially if you love Lord of the Rings. It really does feel good if you love Lord of the Rings. They have kind of streamlined it a bit in terms of the list building, in addition to the kit bash and stuff I said earlier. Now they're trying to limit list building configuration to forces as they would have been seen in the movies, or in some cases the narrative, right? So there's no real force where you're allowed to mix like Boromir with Gandalf the White anymore, even though they both can run in like Gondor armies. There's not like a legal roster that includes the two of them as options. So that is a bit of a complaint I know some people have. It doesn't bother me as much because I do kind of appreciate that to a certain degree. It does limit you, but it limits you in a way that still forces you to pick and have some player expression in the way you want to be playing, and not just MacGyver the best things together and have a completely OP force. And obviously, like, all of them still have a point value. If you want to play narratively with it all, go for it. There's nothing stopping you, right? It's just competitively, that's how they want to present it. That's how they want to balance it, and you have reasons to collect multiple forces. I have taken the plunge and kind of have 3-ish at the moment. They're very easy to collect because their battle forces often are a complete army. The Isengard battle force, for instance, comes with Saruman, Grima, and a bunch of warriors and scouts that you can easily make into a Army of the Hand, I believe it's what it's called, battle force for the game. I also have the Army of the Last Alliance, and naturally I was like, well, I've got all these elves. If I just add a few more, I will have Rivendell, and I also have started the bones of a Gondor army with Boromir, because Boromir is awesome, both in the movies and the games, and in the books. He is also one of the strongest characters in the game in general. Frankly, he is kind of busted. So it's a lot of fun seeing like a what if he lived version running around doing stuff, right? It's a great product to recommend also for Burnout because it's still in the GW ecosystem, and it's a very easy one to get people into, because with bolt action, for instance, not everyone wants to get into World War II. A lot of people that like miniature games would love the Lord of the Rings miniature game. It's very easy to collect. And honestly, because it's not like a giant event thing like 40k, there's not an LVO for it, even though it may be at some of those events, you can buy plenty of this stuff off of Etsy and make your own army. That's what I've done, especially because some of the models are quite old. You can kind of hit that middle ground of competitive play with 40K and the narrative beer and pretzels with Lord of the Rings. You can meet them in the middle because it's more balanced and more sort of put together in a competitive sense than Bolt Action. But it's less hardcore and more forgiving than 40K. 40K, often one of the things you see nowadays is if you leave something out or if you make a bad move with a unit, it's like chess in the fact that that unit will just die. Again, in this, it's harder to actually kill stuff and fights are more drawn out, so you can have more interesting stories throughout the game that last long, and the games themselves often don't have a turn time unless the scenario or the TO or whatever you're doing, I guess, or just you and your friends have a set turn time. They usually have like a break point that once a certain unit is killed, once a certain amount of the enemy army is killed, that's when it sort of starts the countdown timer. So it's very forgiving in that sense. And again, you don't have to collect very much of it. So I highly recommend this one as well for anyone experiencing some miniature fatigue, especially because it gives you a reason to watch the movies and paint the entire time, and maybe even learn more about the lore if you haven't read the books. You know, you can always read the army books and kind of get by and be like, yeah, I've totally read the Lord of the Rings books. Here's what this character does. Knowing you only know that because you know you need to roll 5s to wound a troll with him. You know, that's fine. Kind of wrapping up April and May. May, I ended up having to go to Connecticut for a little bit on some work trip. And while I was there, the World Years Codex came out. And it seemed very dire for a while. It was kind of weird just being in a little Airbnb in Connecticut and just seeing so much panic on Reddit, on Discord, on everywhere you could see people talking about this. So much panic. All my friends messaging me like, hey, it's over, World Years are dead, you're screwed. And it was a time where I was very bored in this place that I couldn't really leave. I didn't have my car with me at the time, and I could barely walk down to a coffee shop. There was so much construction as well. It was so loud. The Airbnb I was staying in, the downstairs had a chihuahua that was barking constantly. And I'm just sitting there going, okay, no more feeling of pain, no more advance in charge, and just trying to like go, okay, maybe it's all rumors, maybe it's all true. Who knows what's going to actually happen. That's what it was. It was all like speculation at this point. The next month the Codex came out, but they were doing all the leaks and like the community Warhammer posts. So it was a bit of just like being in this echo chamber. And time has kind of proven that, you know, you should just do what I did at the time and just tune all that out and just find yourself something to do. Because most of the time it's all doomer posting. Yeah, things change. Things have been fine for World Eaters if you've been tracking it. Yeah, recently we've gotten some nerfs that haven't been great, but in recent times that Codex has proven good. It's just different and honestly probably healthier for the game as a whole. Okay? So when something like that comes out, and yes, sometimes it may be just as bad as it seems, there's nothing you can really do about it. Just find something else to do. Do what I did. Write a book while you're there. Write a book. That's what I'm telling you to do. June, July, and August continued to be the summer of alternative games for me because I got into another one while I was doing a lot of traveling at this time across the country. And that extra game was Star Wars Shatterpoint. This is the largest scale game I've ever played, and it's a lot of fun. It is kind of described as a Saturday morning's cartoon game by some because your units very rarely actually die. It's very similar to Marvel Crisis Protocol if you play that. I mean, it's made by the same people. If you want more of the, you know, things die and activations, you can play Legion. I've not played Legion. I'm still waiting for a demo on it. But Shatterpoint is a lot of fun because there's a lot of synergy. There's a lot of freedom in the list building, and it's all about like fluidity of movement and combinations like that. And it's really rewarding when you get a chain of activations off that feels just right and gets exactly what you need to get done. It is a completely different style of war game because of that, because of the lack of things actually dying. But if you've played Marvel Crisis Protocol, or you know, I mean, good odds you know someone if you're in this hobby space that has played it. I've played that game. It's a lot of fun. And it has a similar, although different, style of list building where it's like list building is just like taking all these iconic characters and seeing, okay, how do I meld them together? But it kind of prevents itself from being soup, as does Star Wars, because there are keywords that you want to benefit off of. For instance, I play clones. I play a lot of Galactic Republic. Rules wise, I can have separatists in my army. Hell, I can even have a separate squad from a different era. I believe the rule is a squad has to be in the same era, but you take 2 squads a game, and the second squad could be of a different era. But the way these characters all interact with each other, often they'll say, like Mace Windu, for instance, all of his abilities benefit or activate off of other Galactic Republic models. So you want as many as possible. Clones affect clones and stuff. So you are completely able to play the game how you want. In fact, there's some characters that are very quote unquote selfish characters that you can put in any roster because you don't really care what they do or who they interact with. But there's a lot of reasons to keep it flavorful, which is just really good from a design perspective where, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but you are ultimately incentivized to keep the game flavorful. It also is pretty fun from a terrain building perspective because it's the one game I've played in a while that actually incentivizes verticality in the board building. There's a lot of ladders, ingress points, jump is a mechanic, and scaling and jumping down and doing vaulting attacks, like having General Grievous dash across the board, somersault off like a high rise to land and do an impact attack with a lot of damage on a unit of clones that is below them. It also is a game with like variable objectives. You never know where it's going to be active. It has a push and pull system in terms of the way the scoring works. It's very different. And if you love Star Wars but are like me and you're kind of not watching new Star Wars stuff because, oh my god, fatigue, and most of it's not good except for Andor, sure. This is a great way to kind of latch onto that and say, like, here's something that is good. Here's something I can look forward to, instead of just like, oh no, another new product. You can be like, I have miniatures of this great little universe that I remember why I got into it. I have toys for when I was young now. And it is actually a really good competitive game because it's kind of built that way. It's built to be just one-on-one, 2 teams versus 2 teams, and the entire list building again is around synergies. So when that is the core of the game, it incentivizes good competitive play. And it's a game that, because it is very simple to understand that between factions, like there's not a separate faction that's playing completely different from everyone else. You kind of understand the core concepts of what everyone's trying to do in terms of mobility and in terms of like sharing activations. It's a very easy game to talk with your opponent and be like, what should I add in? Should I splash for this? What should I have done differently? And those are great opportunities to talk. Yeah, you may get into a case where, for instance, the Separatists don't have a great line right now, but there's still things you can do with them, and you can talk to people about like, well, if you keep all these units together a little bit better, yeah, you're going to suffer probably early scoring, but maybe later game, you're going to be able to wipe me off the field and just like shoot all my guys and make them useless, right? You can very easily have those conversations with all Shatterpoint players, I have found. Additionally, we're still playing a lot of Lord of the Rings at the time. It's something easy to travel with. It's something easy to collect and paint and just like Etsy shop while I'm in a boring meeting, frankly. And while I was traveling, I could just brush up on the rules and talk to my friends or like watch the movies at the time and just think about like, oh, what if I built this out? And I could sort of quote this scene constantly. It was a lot of fun getting in smaller games. I got to see how treants work, they're a pain. I got to see how eagles work, they're a pain. Most commonly I ended up playing my buddy Nick and his Mordor orcs, which we always just joke about how like trash the Mordor orcs are, or the Nazgul, because Nazgul are really cool in Lord of the Rings, except they only have 1 wound for the most part, or I think in the case of the Witch King, like 1 fate, or maybe it's 1 wound and 3 fate or something like that. So if you can do like multiples of just damage to them, they just die. It's really funny. And he has a beautifully planted Nazgul on a Fell Beast that he'll fly out every so often, and then a fireball will just hit it, and it's like there's 200 points just disintegrated, because once the Nazgul goes, the dragon flies off. It's a lot of fun and is another one that you can really build out a lot of tables for, as I'll be sharing some photos of my time at Nova. End of August then brought us to Nova 2025. And if you've not been to Nova up here in DC, it is a hell of a time for any game experience, really. There are tons of events here, tons of tables, tons of painting. Bit of a controversy, if you will, for this year, but you can Google that. I'm not going to get into it. It's just up in the air whether or not me and my group will be going this year. But in the past, if you played Conquest, you've got a tournament. If you play Lord of the Rings, you've got gorgeous tables that not only there's a tournament for it, but you can just go down with your buddies like I would and just play on them when nobody's there. Like, that's totally allowed. People were even filming YouTube videos on them. You can do duos tournaments for Warhammer Fantasy. You can get demos of all sorts of different startup games in the halls. You have massive Horse Heresy campaigns. It's a lot of fun. And then you have the Warhammer Grand Tournament, which is 9 games over 3 days. And it's exhausting. The year before, I even did a trios tournament, meaning I was playing 12 games over 4 days, which was way too much. Me and my trios team agreed that was too much, and we just did the main tournament this year. And this ended up being a really special experience for me. Again, I was bringing World Eaters, and specifically I brought the Khorne Demonkin. The World Eaters where you get to play a little bit of World Eaters and a little bit of like Khorne Demons and mash them together and get some interesting rules. I had played in a few RTTs, won a few, and at this point I was like, if I do really well, maybe I can hit a goal this year of finishing like top 10 worldwide for World Eaters, which would be huge in the ITC, for me at least. And I went to the tournament wanting, therefore, to win 5 games. And really, if you're not familiar with the way Nova Structuring works, I wanted those 5 games to be early, because the way it works is you'll play 5 games, and then you'll be put into like pods based on that record. And once you're in that pod, you are sort of locked into that placing bracket. So if you are in the 3-2 pod after your first 5 games, you'll be put in a grouping of everyone else who went 3-2, and then for your last 4 games, you'll be competing in that. And Nova sometimes has like some variation of prizes for people who win those groupings. But essentially, you will then not place lower than anyone who went 2-3, even if they win out their pod and you lose out. But similarly, you will not place any higher than someone that went 4-1, for instance. So that's kind of how the placings work there. I had the fortune to win out 5-0 in the early part of the tournament and get placed into the top 16, top 32, whatever it was, that top bracket. And I ended up coming in 4th at Nova, which was unbelievable. All my friends were there and were super proud of me. I think I teared up at one point as I finished my round 9 with a win, sealing the deal at 8-1. With that one being on stream against Brian Doherty, again, of the Red Path, who I actually had I was like, maybe I'll get to meet him while I'm here. And then I wake up day 3 and I'm paired into him. And then Scary comes over and says, hey, do you guys want to be on stream? So I have to, I am very giddy and very flustered and just trying to smile the whole time and look happy on camera, because I always try to present myself as just like a happy guy joking around. And I am making so many mistakes and failing so many charge rolls as Scary and JT McDowell from Play on Tabletop are playing and Brian's talking to me. It was a lot of fun though, and it has led to a very interesting place for me, because placing 4th and because of the golden tickle trickle down, I ended up getting a ticket to Worlds. I got to go with my buddies Trent and Eric, and I get to compete. Brian was going there and I got to meet him there as well, again, as we'll talk more on later. But suddenly I went just wanting to win 5 games, and now I'm going to the biggest tournament of all, which was insane for me. And because of that stream, I, joined a few World Leader Discords and was able to say hi to some folks. I got to, again, make a video with Brian because of how I did at the whole tournament, and it's been really interesting to dive in and suddenly be pretty well known in a faction community for being a detachment specialist, if you will. It's a lot of fun, and it is something where even when you get burnt out, you kind of are like, well, I want to make people proud and keep experimenting. I get to talk just with people I've met through these Discords asking me for advice, and I get to bounce ideas off of them, see how they do, give them advice in terms of the tactics of how it all plays as things develop. How do I feel about different data slate updates? It's been really cool, and sure enough, that mixed with the appearance at Worlds meant I got to finish the year in the top 10 of the World Leaders. In fact, just kind of jumping ahead here, I finished 2025 as the 4th ranked World Leader in the world. So I was really happy to hit that goal. I don't know if I'll come anywhere close this year, but it was pretty exhilarating. And for the bottom of my heart, the World Leaders community is actually one of the most chill communities in 40K I've ever seen. Any of y'all watching, y'all are great. Y'all just like roll with the punches and are like, we're just gonna charge. I don't care what comes my way, we're just gonna charge, and everything's a mode conversion. It's been a lot of fun. So that was my Nova experience. In September, I was kind of forced to take a little bit of a break because I got 2 little bloodletters of my own in the form of 2 kittens, Winston and Ellie. No, they're not named after anybody. I know everyone's always very curious about that. They were just the names we thought stuck well as we tried a bunch of different ones. These 2 were 3 months old when we got them, and they are incredibly destructive, and I love them. But it meant that September I had to put all hobby on hold because I had to hide everything, make sure they don't choke on anything, clean up everything. Take them to the vet multiple times because they had some very early digestive problems. So all of September basically was on hold. But then October, we got into yet another new game. And again, in a different vein from really any of the other ones I play, and that is Blackout, as I mentioned earlier. Blackout is sort of a futurist game that is very hardcore tactical, which is interesting from a miniatures perspective because, you're used to that in video games. You're used to that delineation between like Call of Duty, Arma, CSGO, Valorant, right? You're used to that sort of delineation. I was not used to sort of seeing that in a miniatures game. And the fact of the matter is, this is a small squad-based game that is developed by veterans that is so incredibly lethal that the rounds are very quick. They have lean out of cover mechanics. The Overwatch is one of those ones where you can, like bolt action Overwatch, in the middle of someone's move, right? Depending on how far they move, or you can reactive fire to them shooting at you. And it is the reason it's so lethal is your guns will shoot multiple bullets, and most things have 1 point of health. They do have an armor save, but the way the rules work is that anytime you get hit, you can only save as many hits as armor saves as you have. Most things have 1. So if they get hit twice in the same sequence of shooting, they automatically die. And it's great because you can just kind of re-rack very quickly. Typically you're playing around with like 9 to 11 models of some flavor. I think most of the flavor also, by the way, is, Titanfall, because they do have dusters, and a lot of the tech is very Titanfall-esque with like booster jumpers and stuff like that. But you deploy them all together, and then the squads sort of, even though the miniatures can go whichever way they want, the squads all activate at once, and typically you have 3 squads aside. Maybe you throw in a duster, maybe someone's got a special unit that lets them have like a 4th activation of like tiny little claymore crabs, like one of my factions gets to have that option. But it is very punishing for any mistakes. But again, that means because of the size of the game, it's not like 40K where you screw up and then you're stuck there for 2.5 hours. It's you screw up and then you can just re-rack because you lost half your squad and now the game's over, because of the way overrun points work and the way scoring works in that game. It's also a D10 based miniatures game, which is very interesting. I appreciate them using D10 over D6 because it means when you're using D10, you're able to have a little bit more variance and at the same time have a smaller set of stats. Because when you have a D6 system, eventually you run out of ways on that D6 to meaningfully differentiate between unit capabilities. When you have a D10, you can sort of exacerbate those differences, right? So in the D6 system, the way to solve it is you have to add more stat blocks and more interactions. And the D10 is just make the roll harder. And they do that. They do that very well because every roll in Blackout is very different. Most units on a D10 hit on a 6. And there's always a chance that things just go very poorly as well. If someone rolls a 10, they get 2 successes on shooting. And something that can be done in the game and happens a surprising amount of times is you can shoot someone and that person who hasn't activated yet can choose to return fire. Usually in that situation, they're in a bad position. You have more dice on them because they'll be out in the open or they only have partial cover and you're peeking out from like hard cover. So in that situation, usually the attacker's rolling 2 dice, the defender's rolling 1 die. But if the attacker rolls and gets 2 hits, that's great. But the defender rolls a 10, they get 2 hits, and the way the tiebreaker is decided in that instance is whoever rolls higher shoots first. So the 10, even though it's 1 die, is higher, gets 2 successes, and instantly kills the shooter before their shots go off. And that can just happen sometimes. So it's also very low barrier to entry. The trickiest part about Blackout, though, is setting up terrain. You can't set up a lot of wide open terrain because of the way Overwatching and Return Fire works. You need a lot of cover, but you don't need too much cover to the point where you're not giving like units with LMGs any kind of sight line to do anything, right? There are some guidelines and they've been slowly trickling out videos for like help because it is arguably one of the most important and hardest aspects of the game to really get correct. It requires quite a bit of trial and error as well as often some custom terrain that you're either going to have to buy or make. 40k terrain really doesn't work for it, even if you're like, yeah, we have a system where we can finally use all these windows that are in these actual ruins. No, you don't want that. You do want to be able to like be in a building and be hidden for the most part, maybe like 1 or 2 windows elsewhere. But yeah, it's a little tricky. But if you enjoy making your own terrain, this is a great game for you then, because you can have some cool battlefields that you get to make with some very intentional dimensionality. You get to be a little bit more sci-fi with it, and again, very low barrier to entry. I think a single army, if you're not playing with handlers, which is like 4th commander unit, you can add in later on. I think they're like $60, like for a box, which gets you 3 whole squads. And those 3 squads, yeah, you can buy like an expansion pack and mix them, but typically those are good to go and you can play. So I highly recommend supporting it. It's growing quite quickly too. At this point in the year, I had planned to kind of be done with a significant chunk of wargaming, specifically like 40k tournament play. The plan was to like go to Nova, see if I could do well, see if I could place well enough to get that top 10 ITC, and then there aren't really any other super majors or GTs going on in my area, so I had filled out sort of the ticket on RTTs, I had done enough. I could sit back, relax, focus on writing, and other stuff in my life. And then I got my golden ticket to Worlds, as I mentioned, and all of that went out the window. Suddenly I am stressing out of my mind. I have an insane amount of anxiety, not only because of Worlds, but I also have to now go on a plane again. I don't like flying very much, and I was gonna put that aside when I thought that the tournament was in the UK, because I've never been, but the tournament's in Atlanta, Georgia, which I have been to. So we're going there in the dead of November, but at least I get to go with 2 of my friends. It's gonna be freezing, but we're gonna get a room to all share together. Ended up getting an Airbnb in some sort of condominium, and we just like mainlined the Predator movies while we were there, which was a ton of fun. And if you haven't watched them, you should. But leading up to Worlds, there was a lot of testing that I needed to do. You know, you want to put on your best show. You want to prove everyone you deserve to be there. And really, my goal was to win one game at Worlds, and I would be happy. Worlds also was 8 games over the course of 4 days. So you had 2 games a day that were 4 hours each. And that was a lot of time to sort of relax and think out your turns. And yet people were still running out of time, which was kind of funny because most tournaments I go to are 2 hours, 45-minute rounds. It also meant that if you finished early, you had plenty of time to go home and relax, as opposed to most tournaments where you get home and it is very, very late. I really went back and forth about what list I was going to run. World Eater points had changed a bit since Nova, and I was struggling to commit. I thought about running Berserker Warband. I ended up sticking with my guns and running Khorne Demonkin because that is just what I knew at that point. That was what I was most practiced in. That was what I was probably going to be most comfortable with as well. And it was something that was unique. If I could get one win with Khorne Demonkin at Worlds, that was huge, right? You know, because everyone else there would be bringing Berserker Warband, and I'll be making a bit of a statement. I ended up actually going 4-4 at Worlds. I broke even. I went 3-1 in the first 2 days, which put me in the 3-1 pod, similar to how Nova worked. They broke it down to pods after your first 4 games, and that was kind of how they scaled placing. And out of 400 players, I then ended up finishing, I think, 92nd at Worlds because I went 4-4. Yes, that means I then proceeded to eat shit in the 3-1 stage, but not by a lot. You know, I got to play with Sam Pope, who I also fought at Nova, so it was great to see him again. And his Tyranids just kind of ripped me to shreds. When I played him at Nova, he was playing Thousand Suns, so we're 1-1 now, and we'll get that 3rd game in at some point in the future. I then played the captain of Team Denmark on Supply Drop on Layout 3, which if you were in the news cycle at all for Worlds in terms of like comment creators, this was day 3 where I was eating shit. This was the day people were like, this is kind of a joke in terms of layouts. Any shooting army this day, or any melee army this day is absolutely crying, particularly with Supply Drop, which I did go first on that Supply Drop, which meant I just had to try to kill all the AdMech that the captain of Team Denmark was putting in front of me before round 5 came, and he just scored 25 points on Supply Drop. That did not happen. I failed a lot of stuff that I needed to happen, but that was okay because I went into that game knowing that I had to try that, which meant round 2 ended and we got to call it early. I got to go home and hang out with my friends again. I then got to play a mirror match against 60 World Eaters against Ben Williamson, who was on Team Australia, who I've kept in contact with since. We got to meet a lot of people there from a lot of different countries, and we've kept in touch with quite a few of them actually. It's a great community at that level, frankly. There's a lot of like people who are just looking for feedback, looking to talk, and you know, the game will be intense, but you'll have a good time, especially if you approach it with that mindset, you know, with all these people, especially if one of them has already lost a game because they know they're not ending up at the top table, right? I ended up winning that one. Demonkin with Forge Fiends does fairly well into the 60 of them. It turns out 60 Berserker lists, that is. And then I got to round out my experience with another loss, but only a loss by 2 points in one of the most Warhammer games I've ever played, which was against like 5 big stompy demons, Skarbrand versus Skarbrand. Both Skarbrands exploded, which was great. And just running at Chaos Demons and seeing how many big boys I can tear down. And I only lost on Scorched Earth by 2. Who knows what happens if I got second? Who knows what could happen if I had one round of shooting a little bit better? You know, it was a great game. It was a great way to end it out against the Swiss delegation. So going 4-4, my buddies also went 4-4. We all had a great time. We all went there with the idea that we just wanted to win one. And we really were able to prove to ourselves and everyone back home that we deserve to be there, that we are of that cut, and we can approach that while also, you know, managing going forward our own anxieties about it. You know, it was a real confidence booster for all of us, I think. So it was an honor to go. If I don't get to go again, you know, I won't be upset. You know, it's often a once in a lifetime experience for someone to do something like that. And I got a commemorative coin. My brother got me like a trophy case for it. We got commemorative dice. I'm always going to remember going to that, and I'll probably, use it as leverage to like subtle brag to my friends for many, many years to come and just annoy the hell out of them, which is my job. And yet we still can't close out the year by just relaxing. December, we had yet another 2 armies purchased, but with good reason and very, very cheaply. December, I decided to join a couple of my buddies for a Conquest Last Argument of Kings tournament that one of them was running. I had done a 1,000-point demo of Conquest at this point, and it had always interested me. The entry point in terms of pricing was a little bit high for me, especially because one of the prerequisites for me is shelf space. This is my only shelf. This is the only shelf in the entire apartment. No, there's a table here, but even that is filled up with some projects, right? So stuff commonly gets moved around as, you have different projects that sell, you have older models that you're no longer like able to commit to that you sell, and then space opens up. In this case, I had 2 bolt action armies. I had Italians and some unbuilt Americans that were taking up space, and I decided to sell those. That's something I didn't touch on in bolt action. Careful if you buy the Italians. They're fun for you. They're in the wrong hands, they can be very toxic. Careful about those. But I sold those, and suddenly I had room for a Conquest army. I didn't buy one immediately, though. I went to this tournament, borrowing my buddy's Old Dominion army. Even though I like to write about Gothic stuff and sort of enjoy horror and vampires especially, I've never had an undead army in any game I've played. So undead Roman statues felt like a good one to finally scratch that itch, right? And going in, these were my first 2K games, and I ended up coming in 3rd, even giving my buddy Zach Halverson a run for his money at the top table with his Sorcerer's Kings, make him sweat just a little bit, which is all I really want whenever I go to something like this where I don't know what I'm doing. Just make the other opponent think a little harder than they want to. That's always a good benchmark, by the way. If you're at a tournament, kind of the attitude you want to give is smiling and making your opponent think more than they want to. If you can do those 2 things, you're having a good time and people will remember you. But because I came in 3rd, I actually won prize money. And this happened to kind of be in line with the store's black market sale, which they said they could do for one of the pre-built 2K point armies that Parabellum sells on their sites. So between the 2 of those, I ended up buying the whole shebang. So in here is a 2K army of Old Dominion that they have pre-assembled. I think it's like the Last Rites of Haslia or something it's called. Yes, it is still in the box because unfortunately, even though I have chosen this hobby for 20 years now, I don't like building miniatures. And these miniatures are particularly difficult to build in my opinion. It's not even necessarily just that the Conquest line is hard to build, although I've heard sort of mixed reviews of that. It's that these guys are hard to build because, again, they're like tattered statues. They're falling apart. And so all their connection joints are a little bit strange, and the way their pieces all fit together can be a little bit fiddly. I have built some of it. I'm still working on it. If I don't get it done probably in the next month, I think my friends might hang me. But I am looking forward to having them built because I've always enjoyed the idea of rank and flank, and now that I've played them, I do really enjoy it. But I need to get more in, so clearly I need to finish building them. And then also I need to clear that space on the shelf, which is just kind of the ongoing project space currently, because that's the only place that army is going to fit right now. So fingers crossed. And then we were able to round out December with a lovely gift from my parents, who gave me the Roost Space Raiders Battle Force for Drukhari. I have never played Drukhari in the entirety of my hobby time. My brother has. My younger brother has sort of a big old Yannari force, if you will. Part of which is his Drukhari, part of which is Eldari that I gifted him when I moved away. And I remember seeing quite a bit of the way they played when I was at Worlds and really liking them and remembering how much I enjoyed the idea of incubi and cabalites when my brother had them. I thought they were really cool back then. and even sometimes would borrow his minis to kind of splash his allies into mine. But now I have a big old Drukhari collection because of the Battle Force and coming into a very, very good deal that a friend of mine offered me on their old Drukhari that they just ended up doing nothing with and just wanted to get out of their house. So I am going to be playing a lot of Demonkin at tournaments still. I think I'm like firmly locked in now as a faction specialist. I need to keep developing that. But in local leagues and smaller RTTs, for instance, a teams league that I've signed up for here, I'm going to be playing Drukhari, and I've gotten in some TTS games with them, and they're just little shits, you know? I think they fit me perfectly for that. I keep joking, like, finally, an army that kind of just is me. Small, pale, and just a little bastard. They are not quite as tricksy as Eldari, while also being even more fragile than them, so they feel more honest to play, and my opponent always gets to kill a ton of them, which is great. Painting them is going to be a bitch, but I'm going to have fun kind of experimenting with different methods because I have so many of them to play with. And Drukhari, it's all the different like gangs and cabals and covens that you get to paint all different colors. So even the Blades for Hire, you know, like I have like here and then not pictured over there, I think I have like 30 incubi now, but all of them can be from a different shrine if I so choose, right? That's kind of how their lore works. So I can paint them all different colors. Not like every single mini, but like every group of 5. And that's cool. So I'm really looking forward to that in 2026. I feel very invigorated. I think going back to why I took such a break off, like going into this time last year, I was very drained. I was getting very tired of constantly being nerfed with the armies I played. But I have so much variety now. I have so much community that I interact with here, and I have a real structure to it that I'm very invigorated in what I'm doing. I'm still writing. I've got cats that are bugging me now, and I'm kind of enjoying settling into 2026 with a lot on the horizon. And a new kind of system I want to do, which is I'm very anti sort of New Year's resolutions because I never stick to them. Nobody I know does. But I think it is healthy to set a monthly resolution for hobby. For instance, you know, I've already failed one. My February one, or I'm going to fail one, I should say. My February one was going to be, I'm going to finish painting all my elves for Rivendell. Well, it's too cold outside right now to prime. There's still snow on the ground. And it's not going to get any warmer for a little bit. And I live in a 3rd-story apartment, so I can't really prime anywhere safe where a cat's not going to get asbestos, not asbestos, but you know, spray can problems. So that'll be a March thing probably, and then we'll reassess. So maybe February is just finish building the conquest stuff. But I find like little achievable things like that really help when it comes to motivation for a hobby. Anyway, wrapping up, this is kind of what I want to do with the new channel, just talking more generally about what I'm doing in the miniature wargaming space. I do want to do specialized videos. I'll probably do one on Khorne Demonkin. But I want to be able to just sit down and tell y'all, like, what did I do this month? What did I think? What games do I recommend? And tell y'all stories from them, as well as tournament recaps and stuff like that. So if you enjoyed this, let me know. If you have any questions, let me know. If there's a game that I haven't mentioned here that you would like me to talk on, not Infinity. Nobody here plays that. just letting y'all know. I'm not going to do that one. But, you know, let me know.